Okay. So obviously everything's a little bit more medical these days. It's carrying everything from quantum into neuroscience, MRI, different types of MEG, EEG, those types of things, and trying to pinpoint basically what's the best route to go with algorithms, sensors, computing, those types of things. So it's a very exciting time. Okay, so Austin's coming on. And it's so as far as these diamond quantum sensors, they're definitely kind of catching headlines. So ever since 2009, when NIST said that you could take a tip and put a diamond quantum sensor on it and use it like a little probe for MRI instead of a huge MRI. Obviously, it's taking maybe a little bit longer than they thought, but as you can see, it was 2019, they finally had the algorithm that could basically look at the red light emission and be able to tell what exactly is going on in the field. So I've talked a little bit about diamond sensors before, and you've probably seen the post before. So, and I wanted to go over this as far as it's an interesting phenomenon. So you take a diamond, and then you can either create it with nitrogen and carbon, or you could just have the carbon and then omit a carbon, insert a nitrogen, and it's called a nitrogen vacancy. So the nitrogen only has 3 bonds, and then the space next to it that's void now has the opportunity for spin down, spin up, or neutral spin. Now, as you can see, so I was describing the image on the left. Now, the quantum sensor with MV sensor is basically, it's all based on, you're in some field. So in this case, you're in a magnetic field, and you're placing this sensor in there, and you're shining green light on it. So green light has a higher energy than the emitted light, which is red. So what's taking so long with the sensor that they figured out kind of last year, it seems like NIST says they did, is basically having an algorithm that can detect the minute fluctuations of it all. Now, the AFM and the microwave generator, as you see in this picture, those are used mostly to under control. And then as far as if you want certain spin states, if you want up, down, 0, like -1, 0, +1. But so the main point here is when the whole setup is placed in magnetic field, electric field, even temperature, force, or strain or shear, is that the output where it says photon detector, that's where you're measuring where all these things are happening. So you can tell basically, like, as a heart beats or a brain, the neurons fire, exactly what's going on. So the potential applications, I shared a little bit with this, is ultrasound. So they proved in August 2022 in Nature Portfolio that you could take a sound recording like Martin Luther King, I Have a Dream, and then they removed some of the noise to it. And then this could have, implications for MRI, fMRI, and other hosts of things. And they even go as far as, using it for quantum computing. You have NV diamonds for quantum computing. So it's a really exciting time in the whole field. And so basically in all of this, you see, so quantum imaging. So basically, okay, so we got more people coming on here. The whole goal in medicine is for it to be personalized. You want predictive. So predictive means that, based on these conditions that a patient has, now these days, you can tell with a greater degree of accuracy, closer to 100%, if the instrumentation is better, the algorithms are better, these types of things. So this article, the first article, this is the one I posted, is basically, if you use MRI, it only uses RF. So this is radio frequency in the AM/FM range. It's used very well for tissues, soft tissues, but it has an issue with identifying tumors. just the contrast and those types of things. We're talking pH and oxidation potential related. So this is the authors here in this particular paper is actually more like an advertisement in Nature, this QSI company, is they use nanoparticle-based micelles, kind of like, it's kind of like soap. So soap surrounds dirt. Well, this case, it's holding in something it wants to release. And it's for getting image contrast as opposed to using radioactive ligands. So that would be something like, a CT scan that uses X-rays, or actually in specific, it's a PET scan that uses something that is either injected or the patient swallows. So the results were pretty good. Again, this is basically, it's a PET scan replacement. So it's MRI, but it's using this micelle system, and they said they got 130% contrast increase over 30 minutes. Now, a typical MRI scan is about 30 minutes. And so the end goal is to release this manganese, which is not NMR or MRI. So for those that just joined, MRI is magnetic resonance imaging. NMR, which I studied heavily in grad school, is nuclear magnetic resonance. They're all relating to using radio frequencies to do, quantum effects in order to tell your organic molecule or what's going on in a patient. So they're claiming that the manganese was released in the patient in this case. So here's a good kind of description here. So I'm gonna see if I can do this. And then, so basically a micelle has to self-assemble. So it's composed of a polymer called polyethylene glycol. Now this surrounds the manganese, and in the presence of a lower pH, like a tumor, it's thought to dissociate. And when it dissociates in the middle step, then it binds to protein, okay? So this is a specific thing. It's called, drug delivery, medicinal micelles. It's got a number of names, this phenomenon that people are after. And in specific, it says, so this pH activated nanoparticle has excellent signal amplification. So they're saying it worked. And they're saying instead of having these radioactive ligands, with PET, that's not particularly good to take in large doses for a patient, this is their alternative. Now, the thing that they touched on is basically this same thing the rest of the industry has been talking on, is using diamond quantum sensors to improve MRI sensitivity. Now, as the first slide, and I can go back to that a little bit later so it just sinks in with everybody, is that you get photoluminescence is what happens during this process of having this diamond that's emitted of carbon. Now you have nitrogen and a vacancy next to it. In specific, they say it's hyperpolarization is the phenomenon, which promises several orders of magnitude. They say in cells, like 1,000 or 10,000x. And I wasn't able to verify that, so I didn't put that number in there. But it's the kind of thing where it's just like a lot of people are talking about. It's the specific thing that happens when you shine green light on the NV nitrogen vacancy center, and then you're measuring this red light, and the algorithm is good for detecting basically, the changes in a heart, potentially with brain neurons, these types of things. So getting into the imaging portion is basically detection and neuroradiology data. This is a process that uses, like I said before, AM/FM radio frequency coils. The coils both transmit and receive, and amplification and filtering are some of the next steps. So this article is really interesting. A lot of you would like to see this. It's in analog devices, and basically it's the data acquisition process. So everything on the left is all the different types of medical ways of detecting patients, typically magnetic or, CT's X-ray. So starting from the top, it says digital X-ray, MRI, RF coils. So that's a way to get data from a patient. Ultrasound, which is sound waves, so they measure, the bounce off the patient. And then you have PET, with photo multiplier tubes, which are very common in industry. And then you have a CT scan, which is X-ray. So they all have they're in industry for a reason, and they all kind of have their perks, and they all kind of have their drawbacks. So for instance, MRI takes 30 to 45 minutes, but it's not harmful. It's like listening to an AM FM radio station, like those waves. However, the magnet is huge, and it can, if you have metal on you, it can be an issue as that gets bigger. And obviously with CT, that's more X-rays. So in that case, if they dial it up too much, you can get burns on the patients. And then you try to limit the amount of X-ray radiation in general. So that's the first step, is detection. Now the next step, amplification, filtering. This is application specific signal chain. So this depends on what instrument. And then you're getting analog to digital conversion, and then data image processor at the end there. So I'm going to get to the big table. I'm going to break it down into some pieces. So here we looked at one already: detection, conversion, preconditioning, digitization of acquired raw image. It's very important. So that's kind of a scope right now as far as to get better prediction, improve personalized medicine, is have better sensors, quantum algorithms, these types of things to improve these things. Now it says number 2, the next step is basically algorithms. Now this paper, I found it, and it says that you can detect Alzheimer's with a single scan, which is not typical. So I don't know if that's quite true. So I read the whole paper. And then, so the paper is called A Predictive Model Using the Mesoscopic, which is between micro and visible with the naked eye, architecture of the living brain to detect Alzheimer's disease. Is a Nature portfolio paper. And they say future studies, so they're talking about what things could be better, will focus on the development of pre-processing techniques for the improvement of the performance of the algorithm on the 3 Tesla MRI data, together with the introduction of an equivalent algorithm for higher field strengths. So you figure QML, all these things that we've talked about the past several months. Now, what they're specifically talking about is they used a 1.5 Tesla magnet in the MRI, and they want to bump it up to, whenever you get higher magnetic field, you get better, sensitivity, resolution, signal to noise, all this kind of stuff. Same thing with if anybody's run samples in a NMR, it's just this time the thing spins around the patient instead of the sample spinning in the instrument. So here's 3, 4, and 5, and again, there's 6 of these, and they say you have enhancement, so spatial and frequency domain techniques for improvement of image interpretability, analysis, segmentation, registration, and quantification. And then finally in 5, image data rendering to visually represent anatomical and physiological information. So in specific, they said this is in this paper, and they use the specific types of brain software called free surfer. So the segmentation step performed by free surfers, recon all function, usually requires about 10 to 12 hours per subject. In this regard, to reduce computation time, we decided to rerun the analysis in parallel using 12 logical cores. A group of 10 to 15 scans were segmented with the later approach in the same amount of time. Now, the thing that sticks out here is NMR is slow to begin with, just because it's AM/FM frequency it's in the kilohertz to megahertz. MRI has been around for a long time. However, if it's used well, you can get good results for soft tissue. And you could see, to reduce computation time, so this could be like an NVIDIA CODA, where you have the CPU, GPU, QPU, and then those specific things that a QPU might be better. This is a quantum processing unit to address this, where it says to reduce computation time. So this one, so management, so storage, retrieval, and communication of imaging data. So this is how they summed it up. It's basically, in the last 40 years, improved computational power and storage capacity have led to numerous advances in developing non-invasive and low-cost structural biomarkers for Alzheimer's disease that combines neuroimaging approaches. So what's next? They say that it's improved so much, and even NMR, and I think MRI, magnetic resonance imaging, came around after nuclear magnetic resonance. They use, it's based on NMR. It's just for patients. That's what an MRI is. So it's interesting to see, because in the next 40 years, NFF, every time I access this PDF, it says we're going to see a practical quantum computer next year. And AWS says hybrid quantum classical workloads. This was back in November of 21. So we're going to see a lot of this hybrid, all these types of things. And then I've mentioned NVIDIA, this heterogeneous QPU, CPU, GPU elements. We'll start to see all these. And then here's the 6 lined up. So you could see, so if you think of it as far as they break it down to, if you look at the right, it says image formation, and then it says image computing. And you look at this and you think, okay, how could, making algorithms be better in prediction, inserting different types of computing hardware. You have opportunity for these diamond quantum sensors, and there's other quantum sensors too. So there's just, it seems like it's a good area to be in as far as trying to address, what could be made better with quantum technologies. Now, the authors also included this, as they said, medical imaging, their major trends. So these are things in the future. So data fusion, CAD, data-driven image analysis, AI, cloud computing, and we commonly see these things associated with quantum technologies a lot. And then also, this whole thing, so we've seen sensor applications, millimeter resolution in hearts in August of this year. We saw sound wave noise reduction. We also saw quantum algorithms. So this is classic back in June, basically on June 2nd, after Xanadu had their announcement for their photonic computer. That was, a really good result. And then obviously the NSF. Now the networking advances are very interesting. It's just going to take a while, even though we have fiber optics kind of, design, or we have the infrastructure. And so the Navy Research Lab believes that we will have a national quantum internet, and then also Fermilab and Argonne National Lab says that we will have, they already did simultaneous classical and quantum information over fiber optic. It's very interesting. So as far as the security developments, we've heard about the NIST, so the 4 quantum resistant algorithms in place. They're like 99 point whatever percent. They just don't implement them fully until they're 100%. And then also the 3rd gen, this is the Samsung Galaxy quantum phone that has the quantum random number generator chip in it. And a lot of people are looking forward to that. So I included this quote, and you can see all the companies or organizations involved. So this is Albert Einstein. He says, logic will get you from A to B. Imagination will take you everywhere. So I thought that was kind of interesting. And then I quoted this in relation to, it's the Fermilab and NYU Langone. They say they're going to form a partnership to further implement quantum technologies into MRI. And this is in the hospital system. So I'll post these 3 papers that I referred to. There's also top 10 in prospective neuroscience advancements. And this is basically just everything you could possibly want of quantum information going into the sciences. And then here's the rest of the resources as well. So it's a very interesting time. Like I said, it's one of those things you just have to, keep up with. And it's, it hasn't really disappointed me since I really got into this last August in 21. So any questions?
Well, I have a comment, Kevin. That's really enjoy what you're doing, first of all, which is experimentally bringing everything together. You're like a one-man band. where you're bringing the best out there. You mentioned at the top of this meeting that you heavily studied a certain high-end aspect of this, so you're really into this. And I also appreciate how you're attracting experts and curious amateurs like myself to bring some imagination, as per your quote, doing our best with the solid science that you lead. And I really think that, or I can really see something good coming from this. So I just want to thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate the insight. With anything, when I got into quantum, it was just, to be honest, what helps the most is listen to a lot of people talk about whatever the technology you're trying to get into. And it takes weeks, really. You just can't, it's a very, same thing with quantum. Is the first thing I would do is just get on, listen to all these instructional videos, hear people talk. In our field, there's in neuroscience, there's a gentleman, his name is Andrew Huberman. So he does a Huberman podcast, and it's 2 hours long. and he does it all the time. It's a little bit more mainstream as far as just issues in his background in neuroscience and these types of things. But I'll listen to that. There's this, everybody, if you're interested in the diamond quantum sensors, check out, it's the the 2021 video, and it fully explains it as far as I could only tell you between spin of -1, 0, and 1, and which one you want, and if a microwave generator is trying to do all those types of things. But yeah, it's all about the industry, where it was, and then you combine two things and you kind of see where things are going. Any other question? I see Tim, I think you had your hand up first.
Yes. I just wanted to say that this looks like really exciting stuff. That I got my PhD in physics doing computational research on Alzheimer's disease.
Oh.
And, I noticed that, we didn't have anything experimentally that where you could just, look into someone's brain while they were still alive and then see the process of Alzheimer's disease happening, in real time in the person. They had to wait till someone's dead and then cut open their brain, and then they could see these amyloids, amyloid plaques. And then also they were doing some experimental work, but it was in vitro with seeing the proteins coming together. So yeah, this is very exciting. It just seems like there was a lot of papers on Alzheimer's disease, a lot more than I could read, and so it just seems like there's been a lot of research, but not a huge amount of understanding. Some understanding, absolutely, but not a huge amount of understanding. And so this could really help. Very interesting stuff.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. It's good to see your background, kind of like computational in Alzheimer's in physics. Now, what Tim is talking about is basically like you have non-invasive, you have the invasive surgery, you can wait till they pass away. So the key in a lot of these things is basically it's called non-invasive, wireless, and predictive. Those what people are typically after. And in that case, it's so there's electrical information, it's called EEG, and there's magnetic, which is called MEG. So you could have a diamond quantum sensor that measures magnetic and in theory be like a diamond quantum sensor MEG, or you could do invasive and then you could just put, it's non-surgery, so you put like a patch on the brain, or you could do surgery too. So yeah, it's just one of those things that most people, if they were to say what do they really want to get into, is the non-invasive, predictive, algorithms, these types of things. So, and then Ron, did you have something?
Yeah, how you doing, Kevin?
Good.
First, I just wanted to reiterate what Dave said about you putting on a great performance and making this group probably one of the best quantum groups. Your open format is just awesome. So again, I know I've said that to you many times, but this is just the place to be. I had a question about you mentioned that there was a proposal that one of these a single diamond sensor would go on the tip of a probe. Is that your understanding what they were talking about?
It was NIST's dream in 2009. So it's not hard to find. You could just type in diamond quantum sensor or NV, these types of things. 2009. So that was the whole thing. Now the talk with the medical stuff has died down until the algorithms, and now we're back up again because of last month in August with the heart information and millimeter resolution instead of centi. But I mean, that dream's still probably alive. And it was just super ambitious. And like I said, I didn't find too much between '09 and 21, but there's likely other stuff out there. Now, I guess, on one of the later slides, what I was trying to say is basically with applications is now we're starting to see applications in new quantum sensors. Now, technically, MRIs and lasers are already considered quantum sensors. So that's the whole thing. Is basically, like this new generation that offers tenfold better, sensitivity, signal to noise, those types of things are in nature now, like in two of them last month. So it's, but yeah, as far as that coming back, I mean, anything's possible. I think there's a lot of probably good, awesome stuff. I think we'll see maybe neuroscience. I can't give a date, but if we saw sound wave noise reduction, we saw heart waves. Heart waves are about 100 times stronger than brain, like the neurons firing off the brain. So it's a little bit more complicated with brain, but it's already been compared. The kind of the one that's emerging already in medical is called OPM MEG, which is optically pumped something with an M, and then it's magnetic encephalography. So it's already said that it's, in the heart article in Nature last month, that it's better than OPM MEG, the one that's people want to work in neuroscience today, for these reasons. So yeah, it'll be interesting. Were you able to find that, or do you need me to post that as far as the 2009 article?
I believe it's on my reading list, which you've contributed to. I just need to get to it. So it's basically on what you've absorbed. Was there any speculation of what of these sensors being used in like phased arrays? So like some of the other technology that you showed, like the PET and stuff, they use arrays of photo cells or photo detectors, sort of almost like a CCD camera. I'm just trying to, I guess I need to get into those articles to wrap my head around what you do with a single sensor like that.
I mean, what you're sounding like is like definitely on the right track. I kind of doubt myself that it'd be a single sensor. Now, these RF coils, there's two of them. There's ones that transmit and there's ones that receive, like in an MRI. So I've looked at all these schematics, and it's kind of hard to tell exactly, because some say, it's just a detector, but I think it's in the RF coils themselves that does detecting.
Yeah, for MRI, basically, I had an opportunity to look at the inside of the of GE's biggest machine at the time, about 10, 15 years ago. It's basically it's a single intense magnetic pulse. So it's really difficult to call it RF, but what it does is that those really sharp magnetic pulses cause organic tissue to vibrate at their natural frequencies, which happen to be in RF spectrum. And so that's what the MRI is detecting, as far as I understand, is the RF is actually coming from the cells or the organic material in response to the magnetic pulse that they just absorbed or are reflecting or something like that. One of your slides, it was indicated that you listed the term AM FM. I just would caution you to try to understand that AM FM in the radio business has two meanings. The literal medium AF and FM is amplitude modulation and frequency modulation, but it's also the name of specific electromagnetic bands, which we refer to as AM and FM radio, or what we listen to in our car, whatever. But AM and FM type of modulations exist across the whole spectrum, which gets up into the gigahertz for the RF. So I'm not sure where the frequencies in MRI lie, but that could be introducing some confusion without a little bit of more information behind it.
Yeah, it sounded like it was a broad thing because it just barely dips into AM. I think it's mostly FM. But yeah, I'm sure you're right as far as like the technicality of that. But yeah, that's definitely interesting as far as the tissue vibrating and then measuring the RF coming off the tissue. That makes
that's
sense.
my understanding. Yeah.
Yeah,
and the reason that there's a tunnel is because the magnets are actually spinning around. The magnetic coils are actually spinning around on a centerless disc, and you're in the center. It's like a centerless wheel, and that's why you hear that whine if you've ever been near one. And the noise, the intense noise you're hearing is the magnets emitting those intense, sharp pulses. That and some people actually say that the MRI actually makes a banging sound in some cases. So yeah.
And I want to welcome on Tomas. So feel free to ask any questions in the chat. You can unmute yourself. You can come on. I also want to bring on Austin. So Austin's in this field, and he could probably provide a lot more insight into it. So I guess of those three articles, Austin, were you able to take a look at any of them?
Unfortunately, I haven't had a chance to look at it, just only because Good News closing on a house soon. So I apologize. I've been busy with that. So that was my fault.
Okay. Yeah. Did you want to add anything, Austin?
This is a little bit further outside of the wheelhouse because we're getting into radiology. Not so much neuroscience, but there is a relation between the two in terms of the imaging, like you said. It's just very exciting, like you talk about with personalized medicine, and that's really the end goal of the game. We can have data sets full of 18 to 21-year-olds that we can compare everybody else to, like most studies. But yeah, it's fantastic.
Awesome. So I wanted to comment on one thing. Is basically the reason why people increase the magnetic fields is it's the same thing if you have an NMR in a chemistry lab, is that you get better. There's mathematical equations that basically says like for an NMR, if you're at 600 megahertz, and say if you're like in high field is what is called an MRI at like 7 Tesla, that you get. It's a mathematical equation that says that you get like this better sensitivity, signal to noise, these types of things. So it's always desired. Now, I guess the approach with quantum and especially quantum sensors would be is that if you could sense at a better level, so you don't have to go as high with magnetic field, because these really high magnetic fields on these MRIs, such as like, I think University of Minnesota has a 10.5. It's a huge thing. And even if you have a shard of metal in your eye from doing construction work or whatever, and you get in one of those, that's a problem. Now, it happens more often than it should that people take oxygen tanks or rolling chairs that they get sucked into the MRI because the magnet's literally on the whole time. So I guess a good value proposition would be is if you have better sensing to begin with, the need to go higher into these massive magnets and less practical because not too many people have anything over like a 10 Tesla, can be a huge benefit for hospitals, smaller form factors, those types of things. What I learned in chemistry is basically the concentrated sample wins. No matter if you take more scans, if you have like an FTIR, which is infrared spectroscopy, if you you make if your sample's not good, the results not going to be good no matter what instrument you have. And I think that's kind of hinting with like the PET scan and the radioligands, these types of things that add contrast. So there's a number of approaches that people have as far as, in industry, better, bigger magnet, add something, a contrast agent, change a setting. I saw one thing where they had an MRI and a PET scan, and the patient can slide in between the two because I imagine you don't want the settings aren't the same, even if the technology is similar. So anybody else we haven't heard from? So I also see BAPS came on as well. So this is, of course, inserting quantum technologies into the sciences. We have more people coming on here. And any other questions or comments right now for myself or anybody else that's come on?
I was just going to say one thing. It's kind of interesting how they call it, when you're doing science research, they call it NMR, but then when you're getting a scan, they call it MRI. And I heard the idea behind that is when you're getting a scan, if it has the word nuclear in it, you're going to freak out because you think you're going to get radiation.
Yeah.
But in science, if you see the word nuclear, then you're like, oh, really cool stuff.
Right. As far as I know, yeah, in nuclear magnetic resonance, which is like chemistry labs, organic chemistry labs, the sample has to spin instead of the instrument. And the MRI, you don't want the person to spin, you want the instrument to spin.
Okay, it's a little bit of a difference.
Yeah. Now, the technology behind it is basically everything, I think, started off with NMR. It's a very established field. And like I said, I've been in chemistry labs where we had like a 200 megahertz and kind of like that 600 megahertz, the peaks are a lot sharper. So figure that same kind of thing in an NMR or an MRI is better resolution. And again, there's mathematical advantages, but there is a limitation sometimes as far as like, if you keep going up in magnet size, then there's, your benefit isn't quite good from jumping like in chemistry from like a 200 to 600. And it may also probably correlate with MRI as well.
Yeah, at some point, if you get a magnet that's too big, you have to start worrying. And I don't know what the threshold is, but you have to start worrying about it tearing the iron molecules out of your bloodstream. It's I don't know that that's ever happened. I don't know what the threshold is, but I think they've definitely understand that while you're in the MRI, those molecules will at least align themselves with the magnetic field for a short period of time.
Yeah.
And the whole thing with the nuclear thing is it's in nuclear or the magnetic, it's kind of the same thing. You have an energy pulse that energizes a tissue, and then you have the sensors that read the response from it. In the nuclear, it's a low dose, I want to say protons stream is what they're firing at it. And so yeah, the word nuclear to a lot of people off the street probably could freak out. You're doing what to me? but but also the nuclear stuff, I understand, is used for targeted cancer therapy, where they can converge 2 or more beams at a certain 3-dimensional spot inside the body, and thereby when the beams at that point merge, the energy kind of adds together and becomes enough to kill just those cells inside the cancerous tumor. that I guess that doesn't work for everything or for every type of cancer. But I think part of it has to be that this imaging thing you're talking about, where tumors are hard to differentiate from normal tissue because they are modified normal tissue. So lots of cool stuff happening.
Yeah, I appreciate the background. It reminds me of Ghostbusters, where you don't want to cross the streams.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, the other thing with upping the radio frequencies, if you're using radio frequency for as your energy source, the higher it also has to do with penetration, just like with cellular radios. Higher frequencies are great for high bandwidth, but they're usually short distance. They're line of sight. They don't go through buildings. Lower frequencies actually will go right through the whole planet. So that there's some of that probably going on. They're picking frequencies that have the propagation profiles through a particular type of material.
Yeah, I appreciate it. The other stuff that kind of, so what we're talking about, you want the best possible picture, i.e. image, like medical imaging of the patient. Now, I saw a picture and they kind of overdid it with a CT scan, and that's an X-ray. I'm going to put in the chat, it's the electromagnetic spectrum. So MRI is the long waves, and then X-ray is before cosmic and gamma. So we're taught I taught these classes in grad school, and it's the students, it takes a while for them to learn. But yeah, I got to put this in the chat. And then Dave, did you have something?
Yes, I did. A smirky remark in that, Kevin, it sounds like you know what not to do to turn patients into the Incredible Hulk, avoiding gamma ray radar. And I'll turn that to Ron. You said something what sounded like biological radar. I'm looking at my University of Waterloo medical tricorder biological radar project. The apparatus fits inside a suitcase right now, I believe, and it's designed right now for pathogen and disease early detection and rapid identification without chemical reagents nor trained technicians. Now, Kevin, the theme or an underlying theme of what you're sharing sounds to me kind of like biological radar. So what I almost see is like not like a Gatling gun here, but you can choose your radar device to fire off. Inspired by Ron, you have two of them, pointing here at a particular spot. But coming back, Kevin, it sounds like you have an innate understanding of different levels of biological radar and what they can do. And they may be very awkward and very expensive. I'm not worried about that at this point. I'm more interested in your knowledge of what can be used when, and possibly a combination of two different things will provide a better result than a single one, and therefore have a path forward for a combinatorics or combination of devices that move us towards the Dr. McCoy medical tricorder device.
Yeah, and just in like with quantum and quantum going into medical too, is it's going to be multiple technologies. Now, I don't know if that came through, but you can look it up. It's just electromagnetic spectrum. So say, for instance, we're talking radio waves, radio frequencies, in the AM, FM range for MRI, and then FTIR, which is also used for heating things at the restaurant, your French fries, your IR light. So then you have Roy G. Biv, so that's red, orange, yellow, G, green, blue, violet, and then you have ultraviolet, and then you have, I think, X-ray after that. So they're all, say for instance, in FTIR, Fourier transform IR, this is, it's bending and stretching of molecules. Now in UV, it's higher energy, so you have electronic transitions. This is why a lot of plastics, go from bright colors to faded. It's a higher energy. So I always look at it from right to left, and then you increase in energy. So yeah, I mean, you could use combinations of IR light and UV light, X-ray, radio frequencies. Now, as I mentioned before, the key with MRI is it's really good at soft tissue analysis, whereas CT is more like it's X-ray and it's more like bone. So those kind of differentiate. And then between MRI and PET, MRI doesn't use any type of injection or swallowing of pills, those types of things, where PET is like a radio ligand. So in everything that you want to
Sorry,
do,
say that again. A LiDAR. What was that?
it's a ligand. So a ligand is like something that attaches to something, like you have organic or inorganic.
Ligand versus LiDAR. Okay.
Yeah, not LiDAR. Yeah. So ligand is typically, you say this and this, or ligand, some people say. Now, in all these, you want to get the best possible picture. And then if I were to put up that slide that has all 6 steps, 1, 2, and then all the way, there's many ways along that way. And I would say maybe the most crucial that especially quantum sensors can impact is the first step in raw data acquisition.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and then algorithms you're going to have associated with sensors, you're going to have associated with computing too. But maybe the computing stuff is a little bit behind as far as the new quantum sensors, not the ones that have been on the market for decades. And as far as orders of magnitude better sensitivity, these types of things. So I would say it's probably that first step. It's the raw data acquisition, right? And then looking for the weak points in all these different instruments. I tend to favor MRI because I understand NMR, because it's kind of like an entryway into it. But yeah, it's basically that. It's like avoid patient discomfort, decrease sampling time, or decrease the patient's time in the instrument, avoid X-rays. Now, actually CT is on the rise because doctors really like the speed. Is you can get a really quick CT scan because it's X-ray, it's high energy, waves. And as opposed to NMR, you always have to, typically be in there 30, 45 minutes. So they all have advantages. And I guess looking at it from like a technical perspective is like, okay, what could be fixed here, or using these emerging technologies. And then Ron, did you have something?
I just wanted to make sure that there's a distinction between the reflective technologies for diagnostic, like radar, sonar, LiDAR, and the passive technologies, and that's where the interest in these diamond quantum sensors really steps it up, because they don't require a signal that needs to be reflected off of anything. They are just literally monitoring the electromagnetic stuff that comes off the natural electricity that runs in a living thing. So yeah, heartbeats, brain activity, it's all electricity. Anytime an electron moves, it generates a magnetic field. So these things are totally passive. And so what we're really looking at, or hope in the direction we're going, I think with the diamond stuff, and Dave's going to love this, is because I'm going to throw in a Star Trek thing, and the thing we're looking for is Geordi LaForge's visor.
Oh yeah.
Okay, because imagine you had a camera that could literally see every inch of the electromagnetic spectrum, not just visible light or near visible light. So if I was taking a picture of somebody, I could see gamma particles coming through them. I could see X-ray particles coming through them. I could see their infrared, their ultraviolet, the whole thing in one shot. So we need a vision. We need that Geordi LaForge visor. So
Actually, they're MIT.
Totally passive.
Yeah, totally. Now, what was the other? It's passive, and what's the other one called?
I'm referring to it as reflective, which is
Okay.
traditional radar, light, sonar, lidar, things that like radar for air traffic control. It's a RF pulse that's just blasted out. It bounces off stuff and it comes back to you. So it's a reflective diagnostic tool.
And as far as Jordan LaForge's advisor, MIT, I think it was in June, they announced that they have a quantum sense sensor that can detect all frequencies of light.
Excellent.
Yeah. So
MIT, right?
And I think it's diamond quantum. Now, in all these things, you might want to optimize, because if you're shining, I think a green laser light is like 532 nanometer, and then you emit at red at a lower frequency. I'm not sure if it's just optimized for that specific, that narrowness. So actually, in the MIT, it did mention MV Center diamond quantum sensor. So I think that they are using this technology to get to all the radio frequencies.
Yeah, and even if it wasn't one sensor, maybe they can tune a sensor to a certain band, and then you put a dozen of them together, and they can cover the whole spectrum. Could be something like that too. But I definitely got to go check that out. MIT,
Yeah, and
you
it was
think?
actually,
Okay.
yeah. Look at the MIT landing. That's the one that should hop on first, and then you can also look. It's I actually think it's Chinese researchers too, but that it stayed in headlines and Google alerts for several days, and usually if it does that, it's something. And plus, it's MIT. I mean, just with these two Nature articles in August too, with sound and heart. So yeah, I think there's you saw in that first picture is basically, you're shining a laser in a green laser, and then out comes a red one. And
Right.
then you use microwaves to kind of tune the whole thing. And then there was also, I'm trying to think of it. There's other ways of controlling while all this is happening, your spin state. And this is why it's called a quantum sensor. Say for instance, if you have up, 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 down, or down, down, that's -1, 0, or +1. And I believe that at one of those, I think it's at 0, it's in this nature video, you have this huge emission of red light.
And it sounds like the red light that's coming back out could be at different phases, different polarization or phases.
Yeah, I posted
Yeah.
something on LinkedIn. It describes it pretty well, and it's got
Yeah.
the links to all these things. So I did a top 10, and it's in there under quantum sensors. You can go under diamond quantum sensors, and like it was 2021, last year's algorithm by NIST sounded like it solved the problem of not being able to tell what the red light means in the presence of the patient's magnetic field. So I think that was kind of like the straw that broke the camel's back. And, it took a while to get these applications. But yeah, and again, in one of these papers, it says you can also use it for force, and it's either strain or shear, one of those two, and then temperature. And then the Nature video said you could use it for quantum computers. So I wouldn't be too surprised, based on all these kind of things laying around, as the articles that we've seen, that we'll probably see some more with this. Now, I am interested with the other people. Feel free in the chat, if you don't want to come on or unmute yourself, any questions for myself or anybody else that's talked. So this is a progression of basically taking quantum technologies into, for me, it's neuroscience. And then it's going to go into other areas. But the more specific you get with these things, the better. If you start broad, like it's going into healthcare. So yeah, it's definitely a learning experience. Then Austin, did you have something?
Oh, it's more of a curious kind of, for example, we know in radiology, MRIs,
So
Maybe.
I don't know. It might be the connection, Austin. You could type it in the chat because you could probably hear us. I don't know if we can hear you. Yeah, Tomas says it too. So definitely type that. If anybody else, feel free to type in the chat. As far as any other news this week, I've mostly been in medical. I do check a lot, with quantum, but with computing, I didn't see too much. With networks, I'd say, it's school season again, so it should be heating back up. So the NSF 2023 practical quantum computer, I've heard from other experts, 2023 is like, basically the year of quantum, because last year I would say partnerships, this year's kind of getting the kinks out. Maybe next year start to see some good to very good apps, those types of things.
Hey, Kevin, I have a proposal for you and Ron. Ron, I'm a speaker or having a speaker for the Canadian Institute for the Blind. And my presentation was, I was asked by their think tank, which are a bunch of postgrads, to talk about the Geordie LaForge visor. So Kevin, I'm thinking I could knock on their door. They'll be excited. Ron, if you wanted to have an expanded conversation around that, Kevin, if you wanted to host a conversation with Ron and you leading it, I would be very happy to check with CIBC and have them come aboard. Like, they were really serious. They wanted the tech to find its day in the light.
Send me the details.
Okay.
I'm happy to talk about Star Trek. I mean, it's starting to sound like the technology to do something like that science fiction piece is coming on. So open discussion on it would be more than welcome.
So for those that don't know, with Star Trek, you want to explain a little bit more, Dave?
Oh, sure. Yeah. In Star Trek: The Next Generation, Geordie LaForge is the engineer aboard the USS Enterprise NCC 1701D. So it's a faster than light vessel. It's basically the Defense Department in space, except that we're peaceful because we've solved the money issue. So Geordie is blind, except when he puts on his visor. So the visor is a cool piece of jewelry which gives him the ability to see beyond human eyesight. As Kevin was talking about the spectrum, being able to see more than what the eye can see, both in terms of the long and short spectrum, and this gives him unique insight. Kevin and Ron, if you want to continue it from there, please.
I'm not too familiar. So I posted in the chat, it says MIT engineers expand the capabilities of these ultra-sensitive nanoscale detectors with potential uses for quantum computing and biological sensing. So these things are coming our way for sure. And then the part as far as the diamond, so it says in their experiments, the team used a specific device based on an array of nitrogen vacancy sensors. There you go, Ron, an array in diamond, a widely used quantum sensing system, and successfully demonstrated detection of a signal with a frequency of 150 megahertz using a qubit detector with a frequency of 2.2 gigahertz. So yeah, I would check out that MIT. I posted in the chat there. And that's what you're saying, is that this thing from Star Trek could, once you put it on, he could see any frequency of electromagnetic spectrum?
Well, the last thing I'll say about that, there's actually an episode where they share with the viewer a possible image of what he sees, because they linked some sort of transmitter to his visor, and the bridge crew could see what he would see, but it was in false color. They're there's really no way they could compress that down into the human visual range, but they give you some idea of shapes and forms that are around objects that you wouldn't normally see, and they use false coloring to show it off. But what they show you in that one episode is like 6 seconds long. So, but again, I think it's like, yeah, let's think about what these new sensors could do in that terms. It sounds like people are already thinking about it. Full spectrum detectors. Wow. And but these things, the other last thing I would say about these quantum sensors or these diamond guys is there's going to be uses for them, outside of hard medical diagnostics. I put something in the chat. It's like I saw an article about how they want to use these type of sensors to find bodies in disasters, like an earthquake or a building collapse. They would be able to detect that someone's still alive under 10 feet of rubble. So they would know exactly where to go, and they could find them quicker and stuff like that. But things in that type of use of it, there's probably endless possibilities there.
The other kind of two quantum sensors that made news this year is it's called an attitude sensor that they're using in GPS. Now, to qualify as a quantum sensor, just somewhere along the process, it has to abide by the laws of quantum mechanics. The other one is similar to that, Ron. It's basically depth of the Earth. So I'm not sure if they're diamond quantum, but I think the attitude is a little bit different. But again, quantum.gov posted a thing. I could put that in the chat. It's called Quantum Sensors Coming to Fruition. And I would check that out. So it does mention diamond, some other health stuff. But again, the qualifications aren't as nearly as strict. We've had quantum sensors for years. It's just the new ones. If the phenomenon like hyperpolarization in a diamond quantum sensor is just orders of magnitude better, or at least an order of magnitude better for specific applications, then those will likely make it. Awesome. Anybody else that we haven't heard from? You can feel free to unmute yourself. This will be posted on YouTube. And then I'm trying to think what else is news. It's just basically quantum computing by itself has no purpose. It needs to find applications. There will be a select number of people working on them, but ultimately, I don't know, at least 2 years, or like 3, 4, 5, is you'll start to see, really cool applications, and you have to be an expert in 2 things. You can't, it just won't come to you. You have to get into other fields. So that's my suggestion of that. Oh, the other thing is, don't be afraid to research primary literature. That'll save you a lot of time in the long run. You'll learn a lot more. It's a lot more dense as opposed to just looking at headlines and reading articles. So I would recommend that. Anything else from anybody else? Anybody else? And then if not, this has been episode 47. It's September 8th, 2022. I hope you're all enjoying your quantum journey into your fields of applications. Have a good night and enjoy the rest of the week. Take care. Goodbye.
Thanks, Kevin.